The bullet tore through Quinn Jameson's shoulder just as the scorching California sun reached its peak, and he fell from his horse onto the dusty main street of Calico with a thud that sent up clouds of red earth around his bleeding body. "Get the doc!" someone shouted, and Quinn heard boots pounding against the wooden sidewalks, felt rough hands trying to lift him while fire spread through his chest and arm. The world tilted sideways, buildings spinning against the bright blue sky. It was July 1883, and Calico was a mining town carved into the barren hills of the Mojave Desert, where silver brought fortune seekers and trouble in equal measure. "Doc Henderson's still 3 towns over at that cattleman's meeting," another voice called out. Quinn recognized it as belonging to Pete Morrison, the barkeep from the Silver Strike Saloon. "Won't be back until tomorrow at the earliest." "Then he's done for," someone else muttered. "That bullet's in deep. He's losing too much blood." Quinn tried to speak, tried to tell them he could wait, but his mouth wouldn't work right. The pain was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and he had been shot once before during a dispute over mining claims 2 years back. This was different. This felt final. "There's that woman doctor up at the old Marshall place," a younger voice suggested, hesitant and uncertain. "The one who just moved here from back east." The silence that followed was heavy with judgment and doubt. Quinn felt himself being lowered back to the ground, heard the shuffle of boots as men stepped back from his bleeding form. "A woman?" Pete Morrison's voice dripped with scorn. "You want to let some skirt-wearing female poke around in a gunshot wound? She probably don't know a bullet from a button." "My wife said she's got credentials from some fancy medical school," the younger voice persisted. It was Tommy Fletcher, Quinn realized through his haze of pain. Tommy worked at the general store and had always been more open-minded than most of the men in town. "Don't care if she's got credentials from the president himself," another man spat. Quinn thought it might be Frank Delaney, one of the miners who spent more time drinking than working. "Ain't no woman got the stomach for this kind of work. She'll probably faint at the sight of all this blood." Laughter rippled through the gathered crowd, harsh and dismissive. Quinn felt rage bubbling up through his agony. He was dying in the street, while these fools debated the merit of his only chance at survival based on nothing more than prejudice and ignorance. "I will go fetch her myself," Tommy said firmly. "If he dies while we're standing here arguing, that's on all of you." "Waste of time," Frank called after him. "But go ahead. When she refuses or makes it worse, don't say we didn't warn you." More laughter followed, but Quinn barely heard it. The world was fading around the edges, darkness creeping in from all sides. He thought of his ranch 10 miles outside of town, of the horses he had been training, of all the things he had meant to do with his 32 years of life. He thought of his parents, long dead from cholera, and his younger sister Sarah, who had married and moved to San Francisco 5 years ago. Would she even hear about his death out here in this desert wasteland? Time became slippery and strange. He heard voices but could not make out words, felt hands on him but could not tell what they were doing. The sun beat down mercilessly, and he was so thirsty his tongue felt like leather in his mouth. Then suddenly there was shade, blessed shade, and a voice that cut through everything else with its clarity and command. "Move aside. All of you, step back and give us room." Quinn forced his eyes open and found himself looking up at a woman who could not have been more than 25 or 26 years old. She had dark auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, and her face was striking in its intensity, all sharp focus and determination. Her eyes were a startling green, and they swept over him with a clinical assessment that somehow felt more reassuring than all the panicked hovering of the men. "Can you hear me?" she asked, kneeling beside him without any apparent concern for the blood soaking into the earth. She wore a simple gray dress with the sleeves already rolled up to her elbows, and she carried a black leather medical bag that she set down with practiced ease. "Yes," Quinn managed to croak out. "Good. My name is Dr. Sarah Brennan. I am going to remove this bullet and patch you up, but I will not lie to you. It is going to hurt considerably." Her hands were already moving as she spoke, unbuttoning his shirt with efficient movements. "The bullet entered high on your left shoulder. If it had been 2 inches lower, and to the right, It would have hit your heart, and you would already be dead. You are lucky." "Don't feel lucky," Quinn gasped out. "I imagine not." There was the ghost of sympathy in her voice, but her hands never stopped moving. "Tommy, I need you to hold pressure here while I prepare. Can you do that?" "Yes, madam, Dr. Brennan. The rest of you can either help or leave, but if you stay, you follow my instructions exactly. Is that understood?" "Now hold on just a minute," Frank Delaney's voice cut in. "You really think you can just waltz in here and start ordering folks around? You're just a woman playing at being a doctor." "Doctor." Brennan did not even look up at him. Her focus remained entirely on Quinn as she pulled supplies from her bag with movements that spoke of long practice and absolute confidence. "Mr. Jameson is going to die if I do not remove this bullet in the next several minutes. You can stand there questioning my qualifications, or you can make yourself useful. Those are your only two options." "I ain't taking orders from no female," Frank said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Then leave." "Doctor." Brennan's tone was flat and final. "I need clean water, hot if possible, and I need it immediately. I need several clean cloths or towels. I need someone to hold Mr. Jameson steady when I begin extracting the bullet. If none of you can provide these things, then you are actively hampering my ability to save this man's life." There was a moment of tense silence, and then Pete Morrison cleared his throat. "Tommy, run to the saloon and fetch that kettle of hot water we keep on the stove. Jenny, go grab some clean bar towels." "I can hold him steady," another voice offered. Quinn could not turn his head to see who spoke, but he thought it might be John Cartwright, a rancher who lived even further out than Quinn did. "Thank you, Doctor." Brennan glanced up briefly, meeting each volunteer's eyes with a quick nod of acknowledgement. "We do not have much time." She turned her attention back to Quinn, and her voice softened just slightly. "I am going to give you something to bite down on. The bullet needs to come out, and I need to do it while you are still conscious enough to tell me if I am causing damage to any nerves. Do you understand?" "Do what you need to do," Quinn managed. The pain was so intense now that he almost welcomed anything that might end it, even if the cure was worse than the wound. Dr. Brennan pulled a leather strap from her bag and placed it between his teeth. "Bite down hard. John, I need you to hold his shoulders. Keep him as still as possible." What followed was an eternity compressed into minutes. Quinn had thought he knew pain, but this was something beyond description. "Doctor." Brennan's hands moved with absolute certainty, probing the wound with instruments that sent white-hot agony shooting through every nerve in his body. He bit down on the leather until his jaw ached, felt John Cartwright's strong hands holding him against the ground, heard Dr. Brennan's voice cutting through the haze with questions and commands. "Can you feel your fingers? Wiggle them for me." He managed to move his left hand, though it felt disconnected from his body. "Good. The bullet is lodged against the bone, but it has not shattered anything. Hold very still." There was a sensation of pulling, of pressure, and then suddenly a release that was almost as shocking as the initial pain. Dr. Brennan held up a misshapen piece of lead, dark with his blood, and Tommy Fletcher let out a low whistle. "That was deep," Tommy said. "Yes, Doctor." Brennan set the bullet aside and immediately returned to the wound. "Now the real work begins. I need to clean this thoroughly and stitch it closed. If infection sets in, he will die anyway." She worked with meticulous care, flushing the wound with water that stung like fire, applying substances from small bottles in her bag that smelled sharp and medicinal. Through it all, she kept up a steady stream of quiet commentary, telling Quinn exactly what she was doing and why. "This is carbolic acid," she explained as she applied something that burned worse than the bullet. "It kills the small organisms that cause infection. A doctor named Joseph Lister pioneered its use in surgery. Many of my colleagues back east still consider it unnecessary, but I have seen too many men die from infected wounds to ignore the evidence." Whatever you are doing, do not stop, Quinn gritted out. He was beyond caring about medical theory. He just wanted to survive. I do not intend to. There was grim humor in her voice. You are my first patient in Calico. It would reflect poorly on me if you died. Despite everything, Quinn felt his mouth twitch in what might have been a smile. The stitching was another ordeal, but Quinn was so exhausted by pain that it barely registered. Dr. Brennan's hands moved with practiced precision, pulling the torn flesh together with tiny, even stitches that she tied off with care. She bound the wound with clean bandages, wrapping them tight enough to provide support without cutting off circulation. Finally, after what felt like hours, but could not have been more than 30 minutes, she sat back on her heels and examined her work with a critical eye. That is the best I can do out here in the street, she said. You need to be moved somewhere you can rest. Where do you live? Ranch, Quinn said. His voice was barely a whisper. 10 miles west. Too far. You need to stay in town where I can monitor you. The next 48 hours are critical. If the wound shows any sign of infection, I will need to treat it immediately. He can use the back room at my saloon, Pete Morrison offered, surprising everyone, including himself, judging by the tone of his voice. Got a bed back there that's clean enough. Dr. Brennan looked up at him, and something passed between them, an understanding or acknowledgement that Quinn was too tired to interpret. That will work, but I will need to check on him every few hours. Is that acceptable? I reckon so, Pete said slowly. After what I just watched, I figure you earned the right to use my back room however you see fit. Then let us move him, carefully. John, can you lift him? I got him, John Cartwright said, and Quinn felt himself being raised with surprising gentleness. The movement sent fresh waves of pain through his shoulder, but it was nothing compared to what he had already endured. As John carried him toward the Silver Strike Saloon, Quinn caught glimpses of the crowd that had gathered to watch. Dozens of faces lined the street, some showing concern, others skepticism, still others simple curiosity. But it was Frank Delaney's face that caught his attention, twisted in an expression of grudging surprise and something that might have been shame. The back room of the saloon was small but clean, dominated by a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt. John lowered Quinn onto it with care, and Dr. Brennan immediately began arranging her supplies on a small table nearby. I am going to give you laudanum for the pain, she said, measuring out a dose from a dark glass bottle. It will help you sleep, which is what you need most right now. But I warn you, it can cause strange dreams. Better than this reality, Quinn said, and took the bitter medicine without complaint. Dr. Brennan pulled a chair close to the bed and settled into it with the air of someone preparing for a long vigil. I will stay for the next few hours to make sure you remain stable. Try to rest. You saved my life, Quinn said. The laudanum was already working, spreading warmth and numbness through his limbs. Those men, they laughed. Said you could not do it. I know. Her voice was quiet but held an edge of steel. They always laugh. They laughed at me in medical school. They laughed when I applied for positions at hospitals back east. They laughed when I opened my practice here. I stopped listening to laughter a long time ago. Thank you, Quinn said and let his eyes close. He dreamed of fire and ice, of falling and flying, of voices arguing in languages he did not understand. When he woke, it was dark outside, and a single lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls. Dr. Brennan was still in the chair beside his bed, though she had changed position and was reading a thick medical text by lamplight. What time is it? Quinn asked, his voice rough and dry. She looked up immediately, setting the book aside. Just past midnight. How do you feel? Like I was shot, Quinn said, but there was less pain than before, just a deep, throbbing ache in his shoulder. Thirsty. That is expected. The laudanum causes dry mouth. She poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup and helped him sit up enough to drink. Her hands were steady and sure, and Quinn found himself noticing details he had missed before. The faint dusting of freckles across her nose. The way her hair had come partially loose from its bun, creating soft wisps around her face. the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of exhaustion. "You should rest," he said after draining the cup. "I will be fine for a few hours." "I will rest when I am satisfied you are stable." She eased him back down and checked his bandages with quick, efficient movements. "The bleeding has stopped, which is good. No sign of fever yet, which is better. But infection can set in quickly, especially in this heat." "How did you end up in Calico?" Quinn asked. He was not sure if it was the laudanum loosening his tongue or simply genuine curiosity, but he found he wanted to know. "This is not exactly the kind of place most doctors would choose, let alone a woman." "Doctor," Brennan returned to her chair and considered the question. "I graduated from the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania 3 years ago. I was at the top of my class. I had letters of recommendation from some of the most respected physicians in the country. And yet no hospital would hire me for anything beyond nursing. No established physician would take me on as a partner. No patients would trust their care to a woman, no matter how qualified." There was no bitterness in her voice, just a flat recitation of facts. But Quinn heard the pain underneath it anyway. "I had a small practice in Philadelphia for a while," she continued. "I treated women and children mostly, the few who were willing to see me. But I could barely earn enough to pay my rent, let alone my student debts. Then I heard that Western towns were desperate for doctors, any doctors, and I thought perhaps out here people would be more concerned with survival than propriety." "Were they?" Quinn asked. A smile ghosted across her face. "Some. The miners' wives have been welcoming. There is a Chinese family who runs a laundry service, and they have been kind. A few of the ranchers are practical enough to care more about skills than gender. But most of the men in town made it very clear they do not want me here." "They will change their minds," Quinn said with certainty. "After today, after what you did in front of half the town, they will have to admit you know what you are doing." "Perhaps," she did not sound convinced. "Or perhaps they will find a way to dismiss it. People have a remarkable ability to ignore evidence that contradicts their beliefs." Quinn wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at him again. His eyes drifted closed, despite his best efforts to stay awake. "Rest," Dr. Brennan said softly. "I will be here." Over the next 3 days, Quinn drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes waking to find Dr. Brennan beside his bed, other times waking to find Pete Morrison or Tommy Fletcher keeping watch. But it was always Dr. Brennan who changed his bandages, who checked his wound for signs of infection, who helped him drink water and eat thin broth. On the 4th day, he woke feeling more like himself. The pain in his shoulder had subsided to a manageable ache, and his head felt clearer than it had since the shooting. Dr. Brennan was in her usual chair, but this time she was not reading. She was simply sitting with her eyes closed, her head tilted back against the wall, clearly asleep. Quinn took the opportunity to really look at her. In sleep, the stern focus that usually defined her expression had softened, revealing a vulnerability he suspected she rarely allowed anyone to see. She was beautiful, he realized, though not in the delicate, ornamental way that was fashionable. Her beauty was in the strength of her features, the intelligence evident in every line of her face, the capable hands that had saved his life. As if sensing his regard, her eyes opened. For a moment, she looked disoriented. Then her professional mask slipped back into place. "You are awake," she said, sitting forward. "How do you feel?" "Better. Much better." Quinn pushed himself up to a sitting position, pleased when the movement did not send waves of dizziness through him. "Thanks to you." She moved to his side and began unwrapping the bandages. "Let me see the wound." Quinn held still while she examined his shoulder with the same meticulous attention she had shown from the beginning. Her fingers were gentle but thorough, probing around the edges of the stitches. "It is healing well," she announced, satisfaction clear in her voice. "No infection, no excess inflammation. The stitches are holding. You were very lucky." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Quinn said firmly. "You saved my life. If those men had had their way, I would have died in the street waiting for Doc Henderson. Doctor. Brennan began applying fresh bandages. Perhaps, or perhaps Doc Henderson would have ridden through the night and arrived in time. We cannot know what might have been. I know what was, Quinn insisted. I was there, remember? I heard them laughing. I heard them saying you would faint or make things worse, and then I watched you prove every single one of them wrong. She finished securing the bandages and stepped back, her expression unreadable. That is kind of you to say, but one successful treatment will not change years of ingrained prejudice. Already I have heard whispers that I was lucky, that the wound was not as serious as it appeared, that any fool could have removed that bullet. Then they are blind fools, Quinn said, anger rising in his chest. I am not going to let them diminish what you did. And what exactly do you plan to do? Dr. Brennan asked. There was something challenging in her tone, but also something that might have been hope. Stand in the street and give speeches about my medical prowess? If that is what it takes, Quinn said. He meant it. She studied him for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face. Why? Why do you care what people think of me? It was a fair question, and Quinn found himself without an easy answer. He could say it was simple gratitude, or a sense of justice, or practical recognition that the town needed a good doctor. All of those things were true, but there was something else, something he was only beginning to recognize. Because you deserve to be recognized for your skills, he said finally. Because you worked too hard and sacrificed too much to be dismissed by men who would not know competent medicine if it bit them, and because someone needs to stand up and tell the truth, and I figure I owe you that much at least. Dr. Brennan's expression softened, and for the first time since he had met her, she smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and transformed her entire face. You are either very brave or very foolish, Mr. Jameson. Quinn, he corrected, and I have been called both those things before, often in the same breath. Sarah, she said after a moment's hesitation, if we are going to be informal, Sarah. Quinn tested the name, like the way it felt in his mouth. When can I get out of this bed? I am not used to lying around doing nothing. Another few days at least. That wound needs time to properly close, and you need to regain your strength. You lost a considerable amount of blood. She moved toward the door, then paused and looked back. I will check on you again this evening. In the meantime, try to rest. And do not do anything foolish like attempting to get up on your own. If you fall and tear those stitches, I will not be pleased. Yes, madam, Quinn said, unable to keep the amusement from his voice. After she left, he lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. He had meant what he said. He was not going to let the town forget or diminish what Sarah Brennan had done. She had saved his life when others had written him off, had shown more skill and courage than any doctor he had ever encountered. The men of Calico needed to understand her worth, needed to see past their prejudices to the exceptional physician in their midst. The question was how to make them see it. Quinn was still pondering this when Pete Morrison came in carrying a tray of food. The barkeep set it down on the table and regarded Quinn with an expression that was hard to read. You are looking better, Pete said. I feel better, thanks to Dr. Brennan. Yeah, about that. Pete pulled up the chair Sarah had vacated and sat down heavily. I wanted to apologize for what I said that first day about her being just a woman and not knowing what she was doing. I was wrong. Quinn felt a spark of hope. You were, but you are man enough to admit it, and that counts for something. I have been thinking about it these past few days, Pete continued, watching her work, seeing how much she knows, how careful she is with everything. She is a better doctor than Henderson ever was, and that is the truth. Henderson would have hacked that bullet out and called it good. She did it right. Tell her that, Quinn said, and tell the other men in town. Make sure they know. I am trying, Pete said, but you know how folks are. Stubborn, set in their ways. Frank Delaney is going around saying you were not hurt as bad as we all thought, that anyone could have patched you up. Frank Delaney is an idiot who probably has never been more than 3 days sober in his entire life, Quinn said flatly. No one with any sense listens to him. That is where you are wrong, Pete said grimly. Plenty of folks listen to men like Frank because he says what they already want to believe. They do not want to admit a woman can do something better than a man. It scares them. Quinn absorbed this, feeling frustration building in his chest. Then we need to make them see the truth. We need to make it impossible for them to deny. How? I do not know yet, Quinn admitted. But I will think of something. Pete studied him with shrewd eyes. You got feelings for her, don't you? For Dr. Brennan? The question caught Quinn off guard. Did he? He barely knew her beyond the professional relationship of patient and physician, but he could not deny the way his heart had lifted when she smiled at him, or the way he found himself watching the door in anticipation of her visits, or the fierce protectiveness he felt when he thought about the way the town had treated her. I respect her, Quinn said carefully. She is an exceptional doctor and a remarkable woman. That is not what I asked, Pete said with a knowing grin. But I reckon that is answer enough. Just be careful, Quinn. She has been hurt by this town's attitude already. Do not add to that unless you are serious about it. I am always serious, Quinn said, and was mildly surprised to find he meant it. That evening, when Sarah came to check on him again, Quinn was ready with questions. Tell me about medical school, he said as she unwrapped his bandages. What was it like? She glanced at him, surprise evident in her expression. Why do you want to know? Because I am curious. Because I have never met a doctor who graduated from an actual medical school, let alone a woman who did. Most of the frontier doctors I have encountered learned their trade through apprenticeship or simple trial and error. Sarah resumed her examination of his wound, but he could tell his question had pleased her. It was difficult, she said slowly. The coursework itself was challenging, but no more so than for any serious student. The real difficulty was the constant battle to be taken seriously. Some of our professors barely acknowledged our presence. Others went out of their way to try to humiliate us, calling on us to answer questions about subjects they knew would be considered indelicate for women, hoping to embarrass us into leaving. What kind of subjects? Quinn asked. A wry smile touched her lips. Male anatomy, primarily. Reproductive systems. Anything that might make a proper lady blush. They did not understand that if we were serious enough about medicine to attend their classes, we had already moved far beyond conventional notions of feminine delicacy. How many women were in your class? 15 when we started. 8 when we graduated. Some left because the pressure was too much. Others left because they married and their husbands forbade them to continue. One left because her family disowned her, and she could not afford the tuition. Quinn heard the pain in her voice when she mentioned those who had left. But you stayed. I stayed, she confirmed. I had worked too hard to give up. My father was a physician, and he taught me everything he could before he died. He believed I had a gift for medicine, that I could do genuine good in the world if I was properly trained. I could not let his faith in me be for nothing. He would be proud of you, Quinn said with certainty. What you did for me, that was more than just medical skill. That was courage and determination, an absolute mastery of your craft. Sarah finished wrapping fresh bandages around his shoulder and stepped back. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Thank you for saying that. You have no idea how much it means to hear. Then you should hear it more often, Quinn said, and I am going to make sure you do. Over the following days, as Quinn grew stronger, he and Sarah fell into an easy pattern of conversation. She would come to check on him 2 or 3 times a day, and what started as simple medical examinations gradually expanded into longer visits. She told him about her experiences in medical school, about the patients she had treated in Philadelphia, about the latest medical theories and innovations being discussed in the journals she received from back east. In turn, Quinn told her about his ranch, about the years he had spent building it from nothing after his parents died. He told her about training horses, about reading sign and tracking game, about the harsh beauty of the desert that surrounded Calico. He told her about his sister Sarah, after whom Dr. Brennan was coincidentally named, and about the loneliness of living 10 miles from the nearest neighbor. Why stay so isolated? Sarah asked one afternoon. She was sitting in her usual chair, having just finished changing his bandages. You could live in town, see people more often. I like the solitude, Quinn said. Or I thought I did. The ranch gives me space to think, to work without interruption. But lately I have been wondering if maybe I have been alone too long. Sarah met his eyes, and something passed between them, a charge of recognition and possibility. Sometimes solitude is peaceful, she said softly. Other times it is just lonely. The trick is knowing which you are experiencing. And which are you experiencing? Quinn asked. She looked away, but not before he saw vulnerability flash across her face. Both. I came to Calico hoping to build a practice, to prove myself as a physician. I knew it would be difficult, knew I would face resistance, but I did not anticipate how isolated I would feel. The few people who are willing to accept my care are grateful, but they are not friends. The rest of the town treats me as an oddity at best, a threat at worst. Sometimes I lie awake at night wondering if I made a terrible mistake coming here. You did not make a mistake, Quinn said firmly. You just need time, and you need people to see what you are capable of. Really see it. That is going to happen. I promise you. You cannot promise that, Sarah said, but she was smiling. You cannot control what other people think or believe. Maybe not, Quinn conceded. But I can control what I say and do. And when I get out of this bed, I am going to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what you did for me. The opportunity came sooner than he expected. On the 8th day after the shooting, Doc Henderson returned to Calico. He came directly to the Silver Strike Saloon, having heard about Quinn's injury from multiple sources. Quinn was sitting up in bed, fully dressed for the first time, when the older doctor bustled into the room. Quinn Jameson! Doc Henderson boomed. He was a large man with a florid face and hands that trembled slightly, signs of the drinking problem everyone in town knew about, but politely ignored. I heard you got yourself shot. Let me take a look at that wound. No need, Quinn said pleasantly. Dr. Brennan has been taking excellent care of me. The wound is healing well. Doc Henderson's expression curdled. Dr. Brennan, you mean that woman who has been pretending to practice medicine? Quinn, I know you are grateful she was around when you needed help, but you need a real examination from a real doctor. No telling what damage she might have done poking around in there. Quinn felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice level. She removed a bullet that was lodged against bone without causing any nerve damage. She cleaned the wound thoroughly to prevent infection. She stitched it with precision and has been monitoring it daily for complications. What exactly do you think a real doctor would have done differently? Now, Quinn, I am sure she did her best, but medical school for women is not the same as real training. They do not teach them the same material, do not hold them to the same standards. You need someone with proper credentials to look at that shoulder. She graduated from the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania at the top of her class, Quinn said, his voice hardening. She studied under some of the best physicians in the country. She uses antiseptic techniques that most frontier doctors have never even heard of. Her credentials are impeccable, and her skills saved my life. So no, Doc Henderson, I do not need you to examine me. I trust Dr. Brennan completely. Doc Henderson's face reddened further. You are making a mistake, son. That woman is going to hurt someone eventually, mark my words. She does not have the constitution for real medical work. She has more constitution than you do, Quinn shot back. Her hands do not shake, she does not smell of whiskey at noon, and she does not brush off patients' concerns because she is too lazy to do a proper examination. I have been treated by both of you, and I can tell you without hesitation that she is the better doctor. The room fell silent. Doc Henderson stared at Quinn with a mixture of shock and fury. Behind him, Pete Morrison stood in the doorway, eyes wide. "You are delirious," Doc Henderson said finally. "That wound has addled your brain." "My brain is fine. My shoulder is fine. Everything is fine because Dr. Brennan knew exactly what she was doing." Quinn stood up, pleased when he only swayed slightly. "And I am going to make sure everyone in this town knows it." He pushed past Doc Henderson and walked into the main room of the saloon. It was mid-afternoon, and the place was about half full of miners, ranchers, and townsmen taking a break from the day's work. Quinn recognized most of the faces, had shared drinks and conversation with many of them over the years he had been in Calico. "Can I have everyone's attention?" Quinn called out, pitching his voice to carry through the room. Conversations died down as men turned to look at him. "Most of you know me. Quinn Jameson. I own the ranch west of town. 8 days ago, I was shot in the street outside this very building." "We remember," someone called out. "How are you healing up?" "I am healing up remarkably well, thanks for asking. And that is what I want to talk about. When I was shot, Doc Henderson was out of town. I was bleeding out in the street, dying, and the general consensus was that there was nothing to be done about it. Some of you said I would be dead before Henderson got back." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Quinn saw Frank Delaney near the back, arms crossed defensively. Then someone suggested fetching Dr. Brennan. "And do you remember what happened next?" Quinn looked around the room, meeting as many eyes as he could. "You laughed. Most of you laughed. You said a woman doctor could not possibly know what she was doing. You said she would faint at the sight of blood, that she would make things worse, that it was a waste of time to even fetch her." The murmurs grew quieter, more uncomfortable. Men shifted in their seats, suddenly finding their drinks very interesting. But Tommy Fletcher ignored all of you and brought her anyway. And Dr. Sarah Brennan knelt in the dust of the street without a moment's hesitation. She removed a bullet that was lodged against bone. She cleaned the wound with antiseptic to prevent infection. She stitched it with precision and has been monitoring it daily since then. Because of her skill and knowledge and courage, I am standing here today instead of lying in a grave. Quinn paused, letting his words sink in. "Doc Henderson just came by and suggested I needed a real doctor to examine me, implied that Dr. Brennan's care was somehow inadequate. Let me be absolutely clear about this. Dr. Sarah Brennan is the finest physician I have ever encountered. Her training is superior. Her techniques are more advanced. Her dedication to her patients is unquestionable. And the fact that some of you cannot see past the fact that she is a woman to recognize her obvious skill and worth is a failing in you, not in her." "Now hold on," Frank Delaney spoke up. "We don't know for sure that you were really as bad off as you say. Maybe it just looked worse than it was. Maybe any of us could have dug that bullet out." "Then let me shoot you and have you try," Quinn said flatly. "I will even give you a head start to think about it." Nervous laughter scattered through the crowd. Frank scowled but did not respond. "I am not asking you to take my word for it," Quinn continued. "I am asking you to look at the evidence. I was shot. I am alive and healing well. Dr. Brennan made that possible. Whatever prejudices you brought to the situation have been proven wrong. The question is whether you are big enough to admit it." Pete Morrison stepped forward. "He is right. I was there. I saw how bad the wound was, and I saw Dr. Brennan work. She knew exactly what she was doing, never hesitated, never showed a moment of doubt or fear. And Quinn is alive because of it. That is a fact we cannot ignore." "I saw it too," Tommy Fletcher added. "Everything Mr. Jameson said is true. Dr. Brennan saved his life, and she did it better than most doctors could have." Other voices began joining in, some supportive, others still skeptical. Quinn let the conversation wash over him for a moment, then held up his hand for quiet. "All I am asking is that you give her a fair chance. When you or your families need medical care, consider going to Dr. Brennan. Judge her on her results, not on your preconceptions. She came to Calico hoping to serve this community. The least we can do is let her try. With that, Quinn turned and walked back toward the private room, his shoulder throbbing from the exertion, but his heart feeling lighter than it had in days. He had said what needed to be said. Now it was up to the town to decide what they would do with it. Sarah was waiting for him in the hallway, her face pale and her eyes wide. "I heard everything," she said quietly. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Quinn said. "You saved my life. The least I could do was tell the truth about it." "You risked making yourself a pariah," Sarah said, "publicly criticizing Doc Henderson, calling out half the town on their prejudices. People will not forget that." "Good," Quinn said. "I want them to remember. I want them to think about it every time they see me or you. And I want them to realize that being wrong is not the end of the world if you are willing to learn from it." Sarah stepped closer, and for a moment, Quinn thought she might embrace him. Instead, she reached out and carefully adjusted the sling supporting his injured arm. "You are either the bravest man I have ever met or the most foolish." "I have been hearing that a lot lately," Quinn said, echoing their earlier conversation. "But I am beginning to think maybe they are the same thing." This time when Sarah smiled, it was radiant, and Quinn felt something shift in his chest, something warm and terrifying and wonderful all at once. He was falling in love with her, he realized. Had been falling since the moment she knelt beside him in the street and promised to save his life. The recognition should have scared him, but instead it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Over the next 2 weeks, the dynamic in Calico began to shift in subtle but significant ways. Quinn's speech in the saloon had been repeated and discussed throughout the town. Some dismissed it as the ramblings of a man too grateful to be objective. But others, particularly those who had witnessed Sarah's work firsthand, began to speak up in her defense. More importantly, patients began seeking her out. It started with the miners' wives, women who had been quietly seeing Sarah all along, but now felt emboldened to speak openly about her care. Then a rancher came in with a broken finger that Sarah set with quick efficiency. A child with a fever was brought to her door, and she diagnosed and treated a respiratory infection that could have turned deadly without intervention. Each success built on the last, and gradually the attitude in town began to thaw. It was not a complete transformation. There were still those like Frank Delaney who refused to accept that a woman could be a competent physician, but it was progress. Quinn watched all of this with satisfaction and growing affection. Sarah was thriving, gaining confidence with each patient, and he loved seeing the way she came alive when discussing medical cases or new techniques she wanted to try. He loved the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her successes, the way she chewed her lower lip when she was thinking through a difficult diagnosis, the way she tucked stray wisps of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. He was spending far more time in town than was practical for a rancher. His shoulder had healed enough that he no longer needed daily care, but he found excuses to visit Calico anyway. Supplies he did not really need, conversations with Pete Morrison that could have waited, any reason to stop by Sarah's small office in the building she had rented on the edge of town. Sarah, for her part, seemed to welcome his visits. She would brew coffee and they would talk for hours about medicine and ranching and their lives before Calico. She told him about growing up in Boston, about her father's practice, and the way he had encouraged her ambitions even when others had tried to discourage her. Quinn told her about his parents, about learning to work the land and handle horses, about the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. One afternoon in late August, Quinn arrived at Sarah's office to find her visibly upset. Her eyes were red and her hands shook as she poured coffee. "What happened?" Quinn asked immediately, moving to her side. "I lost a patient," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Old Tom McCarthy, the prospector who lives up in the hills. His family brought him in this morning with severe abdominal pain. I examined him, suspected his appendix, but by the time they got him to me, it had already ruptured. There was nothing I could do. He died an hour ago." Quinn pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful of his still healing shoulder. "I am so sorry. I keep thinking about what I could have done differently, Sarah said against his chest. If they had brought him in sooner, if I had recognized the severity faster, if I had better equipment or more training in surgery. Sarah, listen to me. Quinn pulled back enough to look into her eyes. You did everything you could. Sometimes people die no matter what we do. That does not mean you failed. Logically, I know that, Sarah said. I know that appendicitis was often fatal, even in the best hospitals with the most experienced surgeons, but it does not make it any easier. No, Quinn agreed, it does not. But you did not become a doctor because it was easy. You became a doctor because you wanted to help people, to save lives when you could. And you have saved lives. You saved mine. You have treated dozens of patients since then, and most of them have recovered because of your care. One loss does not erase all those successes. Sarah leaned against him, and they stood like that for a long moment, simply taking comfort in each other's presence. When she finally stepped back, her eyes were still sad but clearer. Thank you, she said, for understanding, for not telling me I am too emotional or that I should not take it so hard. Anyone who tells you not to care about your patients is an idiot, Quinn said firmly. Your compassion is part of what makes you a good doctor. Quinn, Sarah said softly, can I tell you something? Anything. I am falling in love with you. The words came out in a rush, as if she had been holding them back for a long time and could not contain them any longer. I know it is probably foolish, and we have only known each other for a few weeks, and you might not feel the same way. But I needed you to know. You have been my greatest advocate and my closest friend since I came to this town. You make me laugh and you make me think and you make me feel less alone. And I am falling in love with you. Quinn felt his heart expand in his chest until it seemed too large for his ribcage. Sarah, I have been in love with you since the moment you told those men to step back and let you work. Maybe even before that, when you knelt beside me and promised to save my life. You are the most extraordinary woman I have ever met, and I thank God every day that I got shot, because otherwise I might never have known you. That is a terrible thing to be grateful for, Sarah said, but she was laughing through her tears. Maybe, Quinn said, and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, mindful of the sadness she was carrying and the healing his body was still doing. But it was also full of promise, of hope, of all the possibilities stretching out before them. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. So what happens now? Sarah asked. Now we figure this out together, Quinn said. I am not going anywhere, and unless you are planning to leave Calico, neither are you. I am not leaving, Sarah said firmly. I have worked too hard to build a practice here. And besides, there is this rancher I have grown rather fond of. Lucky rancher, Quinn said, and kissed her again. Their relationship developed gradually over the following months, with a natural rhythm that felt right to both of them. Quinn continued to manage his ranch, but he spent more and more time in town, often staying overnight at the boarding house so he could have dinner with Sarah after she finished seeing patients. Sarah's practice continued to grow, and by September she had more patients than she could comfortably handle alone. I am going to need help, she told Quinn one evening as they sat on the porch of her office, watching the sunset paint the desert hills in shades of gold and crimson. An assistant or a nurse, someone who can help with basic care and allow me to focus on the more complex cases. That seems like a good problem to have, Quinn said. It means people trust you. It does, Sarah agreed. But it also means I am stretched thin. I worry about making mistakes because I am too tired or distracted. Then we find you help, Quinn said practically. Is there anyone in town who might be interested? Sarah considered. There is a young woman named Mary Chen whose family runs the laundry. She has been asking me questions about medicine, seems genuinely curious about how things work, and she is smart, picks up concepts quickly. Maybe I could train her. Then ask her, Quinn encouraged. The worst she can say is no. Mary Chen said yes with an enthusiasm that surprised even Sarah. The young woman, 19 years old and eager to learn, proved to be an exceptional assistant. She had steady hands and a calm demeanor that served her well in medical situations, and she absorbed Sarah's teachings like a sponge soaking up water. She is going to be an excellent physician if she ever gets the chance for formal training, Sarah told Quinn. She has natural talent and genuine passion for the work. Maybe you could write to your old medical school, Quinn suggested. See if they would consider accepting her. Sarah's face lit up. That is a wonderful idea. I will draft a letter tonight. As fall turned to winter, the relationship between Quinn and Sarah deepened into something solid and enduring. They talked about everything, shared their hopes and fears, supported each other through difficult days. Quinn found himself helping out at Sarah's office when she had particularly complex cases, holding patients still or fetching supplies. Sarah came out to his ranch on Sundays, her only day off, and learned about horses and cattle and the rhythm of ranch life. It was on one of those Sunday visits in late November, with the desert air finally cooling to comfortable temperatures, that Quinn asked her to marry him. They were riding his land, Quinn on his favorite gelding, and Sarah on a gentle mare he had trained specifically for her. The sky was a brilliant blue, and the mountains in the distance stood in sharp relief against it. Quinn pulled his horse to a stop near a small spring that fed into a creek, one of his favorite spots on the entire ranch. Sarah, I need to ask you something, Quinn said, dismounting and helping her down from her horse. That sounds serious, Sarah said, but she was smiling. It is. Quinn took her hands in his. I know we have not been courting for very long by conventional standards. I know there are practical concerns about how we would manage our careers and our lives. I know that marriage is a serious commitment that should not be entered into lightly. You are making me nervous, Sarah said, though her eyes were dancing with anticipation. I love you, Quinn said simply. I love your intelligence and your courage and your compassion. I love the way you care for your patients and the way you stand up for what you believe in. I love how you make me laugh and how you challenge me to think differently. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Sarah Brennan, will you marry me? Sarah's answer was to throw her arms around his neck and kiss him with a passion that made his head spin. Yes, she said when they finally broke apart. Yes, absolutely yes. I love you too, Quinn Jameson, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Quinn pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small emerald that reminded him of her eyes. This was my mother's, he said as he slipped it onto her finger. My father gave it to me before he died, told me to save it for the woman I wanted to spend my life with. I think he would have loved you. I wish I could have met them, Sarah said, admiring the ring. But I will treasure this, and I will do my best to honor their memory. They were married in early December in a simple ceremony at the church in Calico. Pete Morrison stood up as Quinn's best man, and Mary Chin served as Sarah's maid of honor. The church was packed with townspeople, a mixture of those who had supported Sarah from the beginning and those who had come to respect her over the months since Quinn's shooting. Even Doc Henderson attended, though he sat in the back and left immediately after the ceremony. Frank Delaney was notably absent, but Sarah had learned to stop expecting acceptance from everyone. The reception was held at the Silver Strike Saloon, which Pete had decorated with ribbons and flowers. There was music and dancing and food, and Sarah laughed more than Quinn had ever heard her laugh before. She was radiant in a simple white dress, her hair loose around her shoulders for once instead of pulled back in her usual practical bun. You look beautiful, Quinn told her as they danced to a fiddle tune. You clean up pretty well yourself, Sarah teased. Quinn had bought a new suit for the occasion, dark gray wool that made his blue eyes seem even brighter. Are you happy? Quinn asked, suddenly serious. Happier than I have ever been, Sarah said. I have a husband I love, a medical practice that is thriving, a community that has finally accepted me. A year ago, I never would have imagined any of this was possible. We still have challenges ahead, Quinn warned. Balancing your practice with ranch life, dealing with people who still do not accept you, all the normal difficulties of marriage. I know, Sarah said, but we will face them together. That is what makes it possible. They spent their wedding night at Quinn's ranch, which would now be their home. Sarah had closed her office for 3 days, the longest she had been away from her practice since arriving in Calico. Mary Chin would handle any emergencies that came up, with instructions to send for Sarah only if absolutely necessary. The ranch house was small but comfortable, a 3-room structure Quinn had built himself over several years. It had a bedroom, a main room that served as kitchen and living space, and a small room Quinn had been using for storage. They stood in the bedroom doorway, suddenly shy despite all the time they had spent together. I moved the storage to the barn, Quinn said. Thought you might want that extra room for a medical office, so you could see patients out here when needed. You did that for me? Sarah asked, touched by the thoughtfulness. Of course, your work is important. I do not want you to have to give that up just because you married me. Sarah kissed him, soft and sweet. Have I mentioned that I love you? Once or twice, Quinn said with a grin. But I never get tired of hearing it. Their wedding night was tender and passionate by turns, a physical expression of the love they had been building for months. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the desert night through the open window. Quinn, Sarah said softly. Thank you for standing up for me when no one else would, for seeing past prejudice to who I really am, for loving me. Thank you for saving my life, Quinn said, in more ways than one. They fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, and when Quinn woke the next morning to find Sarah beside him, hair spread across the pillow and face peaceful in sleep, he felt a contentment he had never known before. This was what he had been missing all those years alone on the ranch, not just companionship, but partnership, not just affection, but genuine love and respect. The first few months of marriage required adjustment for both of them. Sarah kept her practice in town, riding in 3 days a week to see patients at her office. The other days she saw patients at the ranch or made house calls to families scattered throughout the region. Quinn helped when he could, learning basic medical assistance and becoming skilled at handling frightened patients. You have a good bedside manner, Sarah told him one afternoon after he had successfully calmed a young boy who was terrified of getting stitches. You should consider becoming a physician. One doctor in the family is plenty, Quinn said, but he was pleased by the compliment. He had discovered he enjoyed the medical work, found satisfaction in helping Sarah save lives and ease suffering. In March, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. She told Quinn on a Sunday morning as they ate breakfast together on the porch, watching the sun rise over the desert. I am fairly certain, she said, her hand resting on her still flat belly. All the signs are there. I would estimate I am about 8 weeks along. Quinn felt joy and terror wash over him in equal measure. Are you happy about it? He asked carefully, knowing that pregnancy could complicate Sarah's work. I am thrilled, Sarah said, her smile brilliant. I am also nervous because I know it will make practicing medicine more difficult, especially in the later months. But yes, I am very happy. Are you? I am terrified, Quinn admitted, but also happier than I have words for. A baby. Our baby. Our baby, Sarah confirmed and kissed him. Sarah continued working throughout her pregnancy, though she gradually reduced her hours as she grew larger. Mary Chen took on more responsibilities, and Sarah spent time training her in more advanced techniques. In July, when Sarah was 7 months pregnant and moving had become uncomfortable, she made the difficult decision to temporarily close her town office and see only emergency cases or patients who could travel to the ranch. I hate stepping back, she told Quinn one evening, as they sat together in the main room. He was reading while she knitted a small blanket for the baby. I feel like I am abandoning my patients. You are taking care of yourself and our child, Quinn said firmly. That is not abandonment, and Mary is more than capable of handling most situations. You trained her well. I know, Sarah sighed, but it still feels wrong. I did not become a doctor to take months off. You became a doctor to help people, Quinn said. And sometimes helping people means taking care of yourself so you can be there for them in the long run. A few months will not erase everything you have built. Sarah's labor began on a hot August night, almost exactly 1 year after Quinn had been shot. Quinn sent for Mary Chen immediately, knowing that Sarah would want someone with medical training present, even though she had every intention of managing her own delivery. "This is bizarre," Mary said as she arrived at the ranch, her medical bag in hand, being asked to assist in my teacher's childbirth. "Welcome to frontier medicine," Sarah said through gritted teeth as another contraction seized her. "Nothing is ever conventional out here." The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Quinn stayed by Sarah's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow with cool cloths, offering what comfort he could. He had helped deliver foals and calves countless times, but this was different, more terrifying and more profound than any animal birth. "You are doing wonderfully," Mary encouraged. "Everything is progressing normally." "Easy for you to say," Sarah panted. "You are not the one being torn in half." "I am going to remember you said that when it is my turn someday," Mary said with a grin. Finally, as the sun reached its peak the next day, their son was born. He came into the world screaming, his face red and his tiny fists waving in outrage. Mary cleaned him efficiently and placed him in Sarah's arms, and Quinn felt his heart expand to encompass this new person who had not existed in the world minutes before. "He is perfect," Sarah breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Quinn, he is absolutely perfect." Quinn could not speak, could only stare at his son with wonder and awe. The baby had a shock of dark hair and blue eyes that would probably change color in the coming weeks. His tiny fingers wrapped around Quinn's index finger with surprising strength. "What should we name him?" Sarah asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but had never settled on anything definite. Now looking at his son, Quinn knew exactly what felt right. "James," he said, "after your father. James Jameson." Sarah smiled through her tears. "James, I love it. Papa would have been so proud." Baby James proved to be a healthy, hungry infant who demanded attention frequently and loudly. Sarah recovered from the birth with remarkable speed, no doubt helped by her medical knowledge and careful attention to her own health. Within weeks, she was seeing patients again at the ranch, often with James sleeping in a cradle nearby. "Are you sure you do not want to take more time?" Quinn asked one morning as Sarah prepared for a patient visit while simultaneously nursing James. "I am sure," Sarah said. "I love James more than anything, but I also need my work. It is part of who I am. Besides, plenty of women throughout history have managed both motherhood and careers. I am not going to be the first or the last." Quinn knew better than to argue. He had learned over the past year that Sarah was at her best when she was fully engaged in all aspects of her life. She was not the kind of woman who would be satisfied with only domestic duties, no matter how much she loved her family. As James grew from infant to baby to toddler, life at the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Quinn managed the ranch work with help from a couple of hired hands he had brought on now that he could afford it. Sarah maintained her medical practice, splitting time between the ranch and her town office. Mary Chen had become a full partner in the practice, handling the majority of routine cases and allowing Sarah to focus on more complex medical issues. The town of Calico had grown during these years, with new mining operations bringing fresh waves of settlers. Sarah's reputation had grown as well, and she now had more patients than she and Mary could comfortably handle. They discussed bringing on another assistant, perhaps even trying to recruit a second doctor to the area. "We need someone who shares our values," Sarah said one evening as she and Quinn discussed the possibility. James, now 2 years old, was playing with wooden blocks on the floor nearby. "Someone who will treat everyone equally regardless of gender or race or social standing." "That is a tall order for this time and place," Quinn said, "but I trust you to find the right person." In the fall of 1886, when James was 3, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She continued working right up until a week before her due date, determined to maintain her practice as long as possible. Their daughter was born on a mild February evening in 1887, coming into the world quickly and with less drama than James had. She had Sarah's auburn hair and a calm temperament that was immediately apparent. Catherine, Sarah said, looking down at her daughter. After your mother, Catherine Jameson. She would have loved that, Quinn said, thinking of his mother, who had died when he was only 15. Both of our parents, remembered in our children. James was fascinated by his new sister, wanting to hold her and touch her constantly. Quinn and Sarah supervised carefully, teaching him to be gentle, and were rewarded by seeing a strong bond form between the siblings. Life continued to evolve and grow. Quinn's ranch prospered, becoming known throughout the region for quality horses. Sarah's medical practice expanded to include 2 more assistants and a partnership with a young doctor fresh from medical school back east. Dr. Michael Warner had heard about the woman doctor in Calico and had specifically sought out the opportunity to work with her, eager to learn from someone with such a strong reputation. The years passed in a blur of work and family, of challenges met and overcome. James grew into a bright, curious boy who loved both ranching and medicine, often following either his father or mother around to learn their respective trades. Catherine was quieter but equally intelligent, with a particular gift for working with animals that delighted Quinn. In 1892, when James was 9 and Catherine was 5, the family took a trip to San Francisco to visit Quinn's sister Sarah and her family. It was the first time any of them had left the Calico area for more than a day or two, and the journey was an adventure in itself. "This is amazing," young James breathed as they walked through the city streets. "So many people, so many buildings." "It is certainly different from home," Sarah agreed, holding Catherine's hand to keep her close in the crowds. "But I think I prefer the desert." "Too much noise here," Catherine said decisively. "And it smells funny." Quinn laughed and ruffled his daughter's hair. "Cannot argue with that assessment." They spent a week with Quinn's sister and her husband and 3 children, and it was wonderful to reconnect with family. But by the end of the week, everyone was ready to return to Calico. The desert had become home in a way nothing else could be. On the train ride back, Sarah leaned against Quinn's shoulder, while the children slept across from them. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Staying in Calico instead of moving to a larger city, where you might have had more opportunities?" "Never," Quinn said without hesitation. "Everything I want and need is in Calico. My ranch, my family, the life we have built together. What more could I possibly want?" "I feel the same way," Sarah said. "Sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if I had stayed back east. I probably would have continued struggling to build a practice, facing constant discrimination and doubt. Instead, I found a place where I could practice medicine on my own terms. And I found you." "Best thing that ever happened to me was getting shot," Quinn said with a grin. "Still a terrible thing to be grateful for," Sarah said, echoing their conversation from years before. But she was smiling. As the years continued to pass, Quinn and Sarah watched their children grow and develop into remarkable individuals. James decided at 15 that he wanted to follow in his mother's footsteps and become a doctor. He began a formal apprenticeship with Sarah, learning everything she could teach him while also studying from the medical texts she ordered from back east. Catherine, true to her early inclinations, became Quinn's shadow on the ranch. She had a natural gift for working with horses, able to calm even the most skittish animals with gentle words and patient handling. By the time she was 13, she was helping train horses for sale, and ranchers throughout the region specifically requested animals that Catherine Jameson had worked with. In 1895, Sarah received a letter that brought tears to her eyes. It was from the Woman's Medical College of Pennsylvania, informing her that Mary Chen had been accepted to their medical program with a full scholarship. Sarah's letter of recommendation and the detailed account of Mary's training and work had convinced the admissions board to take a chance on the young woman. She is going to be wonderful, Sarah said to Quinn that evening. The first Chinese woman to graduate from an American medical school, I would wager. She will open doors for so many others. Just like you did, Quinn said. You have trained an entire generation of medical professionals, Sarah. Your impact extends far beyond the patients you have personally treated. I hope so, Sarah said. I want to believe that all the struggles, all the discrimination and doubt I faced led to something meaningful, that maybe it is a little easier now for women who want to practice medicine than it was for me. It is, Quinn assured her. You made it easier. By refusing to give up, by proving your worth over and over again, you change minds and open doors. That is a remarkable legacy. On their 15th wedding anniversary, in December 1898, Quinn and Sarah hosted a large party at the ranch. Friends from throughout the region came to celebrate, filling the house and spilling out onto the porch and yard. The ranch house had been expanded over the years, with additional rooms added to accommodate their growing family and frequent guests. Pete Morrison gave a toast, his weathered face split in a wide grin. 15 years ago, I stood in my saloon and listened to Quinn Jameson give a speech about Dr. Sarah Brennan. He told us we were fools for not recognizing her worth, for letting prejudice blind us to an exceptional physician. I will admit I was one of those fools, but Quinn was right, as he usually is, and Dr. Brennan proved him right every single day since then. Here is to 15 more years, and 15 beyond that. The gathered crowd raised their glasses in agreement, and Sarah felt tears prickling at her eyes. She looked around at all the faces, people who had become friends and neighbors over the years, people whose lives she had touched through her medical practice. This was the life she had dreamed of when she left Philadelphia all those years ago. Respect, community, purpose, love. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. All of you, for giving me a chance, for trusting me with your care, for becoming my family. And thank you, Quinn, for seeing my worth when others laughed, for standing up for me when I could not stand up for myself, for loving me exactly as I am. Always, Quinn said, pulling her close for a kiss, while the crowd applauded. As the party continued late into the night, Quinn and Sarah stole a moment alone on the porch. The December air was cool but not cold, and the stars above the desert were brilliant in their clarity. Do you remember that day in the street? Quinn asked. When I was shot and you knelt beside me? How could I forget? Sarah said. It changed both of our lives. I was dying, Quinn said. I could feel it. Everything was slipping away. And then you were there, and your voice was so certain, so confident. You said you would save me, and I believed you, even though everyone else was laughing, even though I had no reason to trust you beyond the conviction in your voice. I believed you. I am glad you did, Sarah said softly. So am I. Quinn took her hand, the emerald ring he had given her 15 years ago, catching the lamplight from inside the house. You saved my life that day, but more than that, you gave me a reason to live. You showed me what real courage looks like. You taught me that worth is measured in actions and character, not in what other people think or believe. You made me a better man. You did the same for me, Sarah said. When those men laughed, when they dismissed me before I had even tried, I felt so small, so worthless. And then you stood up in that saloon and told everyone the truth. You saw my worth when I was starting to doubt it myself. You gave me the courage to keep fighting, to keep proving myself. You gave me a partner who treats me as an equal. You gave me a family and a home and a life beyond anything I dreamed was possible. They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of celebration from inside and the eternal silence of the desert beyond. Two people who had found each other through circumstances that could have ended in tragedy, but instead led to love. I would do it all again, Quinn said. Every moment, every struggle, every challenge, because it led me here, to you, to this life we have built. Me too, Sarah agreed, though perhaps next time we could skip the part where you get shot. Quinn laughed. Deal! Inside the house, they could hear James playing the piano Sarah had ordered from San Francisco 3 years ago, and Catherine's voice raised in song. Their children, healthy and happy and full of promise. Their friends, gathered to celebrate love and commitment and the passage of time. Their life built from determination and courage and unwavering faith in each other. Years continued to pass, marked by the usual joys and sorrows of any long life. Quinn's hair turned gray, then white. Sarah developed spectacles for reading, which she wore perched on her nose while reviewing medical journals. James went off to medical school, following in his mother's footsteps with her blessing and encouragement. Catherine married a rancher from the next county, a good man who loved her fierce independence and shared her passion for horses. In 1903, 20 years after Quinn had been shot in the street, Calico held a celebration honoring Sarah's contributions to the town. They dedicated the new hospital building in her name, the Sarah Brennan Medical Center, a modern facility with multiple examination rooms, a surgical theater, and residential space for doctors and nurses. I never imagined anything like this, Sarah said, as she stood before the assembled crowd, Quinn beside her as always. She was 50 years old now, her auburn hair shot through with silver, but her green eyes were as sharp and intelligent as ever. When I came to Calico 20 years ago, I hoped only to build a small practice, to prove that a woman could practice medicine competently. Instead, I found a community that eventually embraced me. I found colleagues who became partners. I found a husband who stood up for me when others laughed. I found a home. She turned to Quinn, taking his hand. There is a saying that behind every great man is a great woman. I would like to propose the opposite is equally true. Behind this woman doctor stands a great man, one who never doubted my abilities, who championed my worth to anyone who would listen, who built a life alongside me rather than demanding I fit into his. Quinn Jameson, thank you for being my greatest advocate and my deepest love. The crowd erupted in applause, and Quinn pulled Sarah close, no longer caring what anyone thought about public displays of affection. After 20 years of marriage, they had earned the right to express their love however they chose. That night, back at the ranch, they sat together on the porch as they had countless times before. The house was quiet, with just the two of them and the night sounds of the desert. We did well, Quinn said, surveying the land he had worked for so many years. The ranch is prosperous. Our children are grown and happy. Your medical practice has transformed into something far greater than either of us imagined. We built something good here. We did, Sarah agreed. Together. That is the key, is it not? Neither of us could have done it alone. But together, we were unstoppable. Are unstoppable, Quinn corrected. We are not done yet. I intend to keep ranching for at least another decade, and I know you have no intention of retiring from medicine. You are right about that, Sarah said with a smile. I will practice medicine until I physically cannot anymore. It is too much a part of who I am. I know, Quinn said, and I love that about you. Your passion, your dedication, your refusal to accept limitations that others try to impose. You inspire me every single day. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built a love that had weathered every storm. Quinn thought about the day he had been shot, about lying in the street waiting to die, about the woman who had knelt beside him and promised to save his life. He thought about standing in that saloon and telling the assembled men about her worth, about the satisfaction of seeing them forced to acknowledge what he had known from the beginning. Sarah thought about the fear she had felt when Tommy Fletcher came to fetch her, about the scorn of the men who had laughed at the idea of a woman doctor, about the courage it had taken to kneel in that dusty street and do what she knew she could do. She thought about Quinn's speech, about the first time he had told her he loved her, about building a life and a practice and a family in this harsh, beautiful desert. No regrets? Quinn asked, echoing their conversation from so many years before. Not a single one, Sarah said with absolute certainty. You? Never, Quinn said. Best thing that ever happened to me was getting shot. Still the most ridiculous thing to be grateful for, Sarah said, laughing. They sat together as the night deepened. Two people who had found love in the most unexpected way, who had built a life of meaning and purpose and joy. The cowboy who had told the whole town of the woman doctor's worth, and the woman doctor who had saved his life when men laughed. Partners in every sense of the word, bound by love and respect and unwavering faith in each other. As the years continued to unfold, they remained together through everything life brought them. They celebrated the birth of grandchildren, James providing them with two grandsons and a granddaughter who all showed interest in medicine, while Catherine gave them three granddaughters who loved the ranch as much as their mother did. They mourned the losses that inevitably came with age, friends and colleagues passing on, the world changing in ways both exciting and challenging. Through it all, Quinn and Sarah remained each other's greatest supporters and deepest loves. When Quinn finally retired from active ranch management at 70, turning the operation over to Catherine and her husband, Sarah was there to help him find new purposes and projects. When Sarah finally reduced her medical practice to only consultations and teaching at 72, Quinn was there to remind her that her legacy extended far beyond her own treatments, that she had trained generations of medical professionals who carried her values and skills into the world. They grew old together gracefully, their love deepening rather than diminishing with time. They told their grandchildren the story of how they met, about the bullet and the laughter and the moment when everything changed. They told them about courage and conviction, about standing up for what is right even when others mock you, about seeing people for who they truly are rather than what society expects them to be. On a warm evening in the spring of 1915, 32 years after that fateful shooting, Quinn and Sarah sat together on their porch one last time. Quinn was 81 now, his body finally giving out after a life of hard work and full living. Sarah was 74, still sharp-minded but slowed by age and arthritis. "It has been a good life," Quinn said, his hand clasped in Sarah's. Their children and grandchildren were gathered inside the house, giving them privacy for this final conversation. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "The best," Sarah agreed, tears streaming down her face. "I would not change a single moment." "I love you," Quinn said. "From that first moment when you knelt beside me in the street until now, you have been the greatest gift of my life." "And you have been mine," Sarah said. "My advocate, my partner, my love. Thank you for seeing my worth when no one else would. Thank you for standing up for me. Thank you for loving me exactly as I am." "Always," Quinn said, his voice fading. "Always." He passed peacefully as the sun set over the desert he had loved, Sarah's hand in his until the very end. She sat with him for a long while after, memorizing every detail of his face, grateful beyond words for the life they had shared. Sarah lived another 7 years, continuing to consult on difficult medical cases and teach aspiring physicians until her own death at 81. She was buried beside Quinn on a hill overlooking the ranch, their headstones standing side by side as they had stood side by side in life. The Sarah Brennan Medical Center continued to operate for decades, eventually becoming part of a larger hospital system, but always retaining her name and the values she had instilled. Her great-grandchildren became doctors and ranchers and teachers, carrying forward the legacy of courage and conviction she and Quinn had established. And in Calico, California, in the desert that had witnessed their love story, people still told tales of the woman doctor who had saved a cowboy's life when men laughed, and the cowboy who had stood up and told the whole town her worth. It became a legend of the Old West, a story of love and courage, and two people who had refused to accept the limitations others tried to impose. Their love had transformed not just their own lives, but an entire community, teaching generations about the importance of seeing people for who they truly are, about standing up for what is right, about the power of partnership and respect. It was a legacy that extended far beyond medicine or ranching, beyond any single achievement or accomplishment. It was a legacy of love, pure and simple, and it endured long after both of them had passed into memory, inspiring others to see worth where others see only prejudice, to stand up when others laugh, to build lives of meaning and purpose alongside partners who treat them as equals. The story of Quinn Jameson and Dr. Sarah Brennan became more than just a tale of the Old West. It became a reminder that true love sees past convention to recognize worth, that courage means standing up for what is right even when you stand alone, and that the most extraordinary lives are often built not from grand gestures, but from daily choices to honor, respect, and cherish the person you have chosen to walk through life beside. In the end, it was a simple story with a profound truth at its core. When you see someone's worth clearly, truly, and completely, and when you stand up and declare that worth to the world regardless of who laughs or doubts, you create something powerful and transformative. You create love that endures beyond time, beyond circumstance, beyond even death itself. You create a legacy that inspires others to do the same, generation after generation, until the very idea that someone's worth could be dismissed based on gender or race or any other arbitrary category becomes unthinkable. That was the gift Quinn and Sarah gave to Calico, to their children and grandchildren, and to everyone who heard their story. It was the gift of seeing worth, declaring it boldly, and building a life worthy of that vision. And it was a gift that continued giving long after they were gone, a testament to the power of love and courage and unwavering faith in each other. Their story ended not with tragedy, but with triumph, not with regrets, but with gratitude, not with questions, but with the certainty that they had lived fully and loved completely. They had built something beautiful together, something that endured, something that mattered. And in the end, what more could anyone ask from a life well lived?